What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the show. It's your host with the most, sendesdhaiti, back with another video. And today we're going to go into a pivot of what we usually go into. We're going to go into conspiracies here. But before we get into that, I'd like for you all to like the video because I've given way too many times to do it already. But before we get into that, let's introduce ourselves, shall we? You're watching the Get Up Show. We're going to be going into financial terrorism, because there's a lot of correlations between history and the current events we're seeing today unfold real time in present day in live action, and especially with these wars. So let's take a look.
In the last 50 years, follow the money. In 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, and Kissinger cut a deal with Saudi Arabia. We protect your oil fields, you price all your oil in dollars, and refuse every other currency. The rest of OPEC followed. And just like that, every country on Earth that needed oil had to acquire US dollars first, which means every country has to hold massive dollar reserves, which they store by buying US Treasury bonds, which means the entire world is lending America money at low interest. And that loan funds 750 military bases in 80 countries. It funds wars on multiple fronts with barely any economic fallout at home. No other country could do that. And the system has enforcers. IMF was created in 1944, while most of Africa and Asia were still colonized. A British person's vote is worth 41 times a Bangladeshi's. The president of the World Bank has always been American. These institutions gave loans to the global south with conditions attached. Privatize your industries, cut public spending, open your markets. And the results were devastating. Wages in Latin America fell 40%.
Honestly, the US, the UK, where else? A lot of the superpowers you see today, basically, and, the Spanish, they've ravaged a lot of these quote-unquote third world countries. Whichever country that you see that they had their hand in, they've somehow taken all of their wealth, replaced their government, and siphoned off their resources. And as a result, the people there, I'm sure people have tourism, right? So I'm sure people would see the conditions the majority of the people are. For example, if you go to somewhere like Jamaica or Haiti, you would go to a resort and it would be very nice there. But as soon as you leave the resort, or Mexico, as soon as you leave the resort, all of a sudden there are slums. Or Brazil, there are slums, there are favelas, there are all these different things that show that the majority of people are not doing so well. The majority of people are living in poverty. The majority of people are living in shacks and stuff like that. And I'm sure it's not everybody in the country, But for the majority of the public, they usually end up biting the bullet in these deals. Their resources get siphoned off. Their gas prices go up for them. Meanwhile, the people who reap all the benefits, the colonizers, they reap all the benefits. There was this act, I forgot what it was exactly, but it was like a first claim or something, a first claim act that was enacted by the UK onto African countries, right, in the West, where whatever agriculture they grew to sell, these colonizing countries would get first dibs on right of refusal or something like that. So they would apparently ship the agriculture, ship the grains, or ship whatever they're growing to these countries, and those countries would ship it back to be sold in that same country that grew it. So they were basically paying you with your own money, basically. And then as a result, the prices of said item would go up exponentially by the time it comes back, packaged and everything, now being sold to the public that apparently grew it themselves, instead of allowing that country that grew the agriculture to just sell it freely to whoever they want at whichever prices that makes sense for them. So these colonizing countries get these raw materials at an extremely low rate and sell it back at a higher rate. But it's things like these that have always existed for a lot of these countries that are colonized. Like, it's actually pretty sickening.
In Colombia, 84%. One study linked it to 305,000 excess infant deaths in Kenya alone. And then there's SWIFT, the system that processes nearly every international bank transfer. The US can cut any country off from it. No trade, no medicine imports, no access to your own money. They did it to Iran, and they did it to Russia. And a 2025 study in The Lancet estimated that sanctions are associated with 564,000 deaths per year. That's comparable to all armed conflicts worldwide. Now watch what happens to anyone who tries to leave the system. Saddam switched oil sales from dollars to euros in 2000. The US invaded 3 years later, and after regime change, Iraqi oil went right back to dollars. Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency. A leaked email to Hillary Clinton listed it as a motive for NATO's intervention. They bombed Libya, killed Gaddafi, and then bombed the civilian irrigation system that served 70% of the population. Venezuela traded oil outside the dollar. And in January 2026, US forces captured Maduro. Iran sells oil in yuan, sanctioned since 1979, and bombed in 2025. Sankara called for African nations to refuse IMF debt, and he was assassinated 3 months later. And then there's Cuba, embargoed for 64 years.
And usually that's what happens when the colonized country tries to basically remove the current status quo or tries to repair it. That's when they get taken out. That's when they get removed or replaced. Look at Haiti. Our president in 2021 was assassinated, folks. And it was after they realized he was actually trying to better the country and help the people that were there. Like, the majority of people loved our president at that time. But, the current status quo, the colonizers didn't like that. They didn't want more resources to go to the people. So, as a result, in his home, mind you, I don't know how people can just walk up to some president's home, but in his home, they assassinated the guy. And ever since, the country's been in turmoil. And if you look throughout history, these colonizing countries have had a history of being directly involved in government change in these countries. Like, how should that be allowed? That is an act of war, is essentially what it is. But these people are just allowing the ones who are in these countries who do make the deals to literally sell their own people out. Like, they're the real problem.
Classified 1960 memo states the goal in writing: bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of government. And last week, Cuba's energy minister announced the country has completely run out of oil and diesel, 0 reserves. Blackouts lasting 22 hours a day. Hospitals can't operate. Vaccine shipments are stranded at ports because there's no fuel to move them. But the system is cracking. Russia and China now settle over 90% of their trade without dollars. BRICS is building its own payment system to bypass SWIFT entirely. Central banks are buying gold at record levels, and the dollar share of global reserves has dropped from 72 to under 58%. The grip is loosening, and that's why the interventions are accelerating. Venezuela invaded, Iran bombed, and Cuba starved all in the same year. So when they tell you these wars are about democracy or human rights or terrorism, remember the pattern. You want to make sense of every US war in the last...
But that's going to be the video for today, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this, because apparently we're being invaded as we speak. Now, take a look at the United States, right? With Israel having direct influence with U.S. affairs. And I don't think it's the big bear, bullying the little bear anymore. Like, the little bear has taken over. Like, it's insane. But let me know what you all think about this in the comment section below, folks. And I look to see you all here next time. But before that, I'm gonna give you one more time to like this video, cause I gave you way too many chances already. I'll play these messages from our sponsors and we'll end this. Take care. believe it or not, most of my videos were edited using this Clipper AI. And with just a few clicks, you could turn your video filled with awkward silence into a single video without them. Adjust the parameters to get a quick and effective way to speed up your editing workflow at videoclipperai.com. Testing out the Video Clipper AI. The Video Clipper AI is going to cut out all the silent parts from the video.